The elevator doors slid open to reveal the marble-floored lobby of Kingston Associates, one of Manhattan's most prestigious architectural firms. Amara Blackwood stepped out, her heels clicking against the polished stone with the confidence of someone who belonged there. The security guard behind the mahogany desk looked up, his expression shifting from professional courtesy to poorly concealed surprise. "You here for a delivery or something?" he asked, his eyes scanning her tailored black suit and leather portfolio case. Amara smiled, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Actually, I'm here for the partners meeting. 3rd floor, conference room A." The guard's eyebrows shot up. "I think there might be some confusion, miss. That meeting is for the firm's partners and senior associates," Amara finished. "I know exactly what it's for." She walked past him toward the elevators, ignoring his stammered protests about checking the guest list. Behind her, she heard him frantically dialing someone's extension, his voice a panicked whisper about an unauthorized person heading upstairs. 5 years ago, Amara Blackwood had been the most promising junior architect at Kingston Associates. At 28, she'd already designed 3 award-winning commercial buildings, and had been personally mentored by the firm's founding partner, Richard Kingston himself. She'd worked 18-hour days, sacrificed weekends and relationships, all for the promise of partnership that Kingston had dangled before her like a golden carrot. The betrayal had come on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered with the casual cruelty that only comes from years of practiced indifference. Kingston had called her into his corner office, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. He'd been standing with his back to her, hands clasped behind his expensive suit jacket. "Amara," he'd said without turning around, "we need to talk about your future here." She'd felt a flutter of excitement, thinking this was finally the partnership conversation they'd been building toward. Instead, Kingston had turned around with an expression that could have frozen the Hudson River. "The partners have been discussing your trajectory," he'd continued, settling behind his desk like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. "We feel that you might be more comfortable somewhere that better aligns with your background and expectation." The words had hit her like a physical blow. "My background?" she'd managed to ask. Kingston's smile had been patronizing, the kind reserved for children who didn't understand why they couldn't have ice cream for dinner. "You're talented, no question, but this firm represents a certain legacy. Our clients expect a particular image, a certain pedigree. You understand?" She'd understood perfectly. She'd understood that, despite her Columbia degree, despite her awards, despite the fact that she'd brought in more new clients than any other junior associate in the firm's history, her skin color would always be seen as a liability in their pristine world of old money and older prejudices. "I've been carrying this firm's most challenging projects for 3 years," she'd said, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. "The Meridian Tower design was mine. The Hartford Museum expansion was mine. Half your portfolio exists because of my work." Kingston had shrugged, already dismissing her. "Credit is a complicated thing in architecture, Amara. It's about more than just drawing pretty pictures. It's about relationships, trust, tradition, things that can't be taught." The final insult had come when she'd cleaned out her desk. Her assistant Janet had whispered that the partnership she'd been promised was being given to Marcus Whitfield, a mediocre architect whose main qualification was being Kingston's golf buddy's son. Marcus, who joined the firm 6 months after Amara, but somehow leapfrogged over her simply by virtue of having the right last name and the right connection. Now, 5 years later, Amara rode the elevator to the 3rd floor with a different kind of confidence. She'd spent those years building something Kingston couldn't take away from her. Her own reputation, her own firm, and most importantly, her own power. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the 3rd floor. Amara stepped into the familiar hallway, noting how little had changed. The same generic modern art hung on the walls, The same beige carpet muffled her footsteps. Conference room A sat at the end of the hall, its frosted glass doors revealing the shadows of figures already gathered inside. She paused outside the door, listening to the familiar voices drifting through the glass. Kingston's booming laugh, Marcus Whitfield's nervous giggle, the cultured tones of the other partners who'd stood silently by while she'd been pushed out. They were celebrating something, champagne glasses clinking in the late afternoon light. Amara checked her watch. 4:47 p.m. Perfect timing. She knocked once, a sharp rap that cut through their conversation like a blade. The voices inside fell silent. After a moment, the door opened to reveal Marcus Whitfield, his face flushed with champagne and confusion. "I'm sorry, but this is a private meeting," he started, then stopped as recognition dawned. "Amara, what are you doing here?" "Hello, Marcus," she said, stepping past him into the room. "I'm here about the Morrison Building project." The conference room fell dead silent. 8 faces turned toward her with expressions ranging from confusion to alarm. At the head of the table, Richard Kingston's face had gone ashen, his champagne flute frozen halfway to his lips. "I think there's been some mistake," Kingston said slowly. "We're having a private celebration here. Perhaps you could call Janet to schedule an appointment." Amara set her portfolio case on the polished conference table with a soft thud that seemed to echo in the silence. "There's no mistake, Richard. I'm here exactly when I need to be." She opened the case and withdrew a thick manila folder, its contents meticulously organized behind colored tabs. "The Morrison Building project," she continued, letting her eyes sweep across the room. 40-story mixed-use development in downtown Brooklyn. Your firm's been working on it for 18 months now? Kingston's jaw tightened. "I don't see how that concerns you." Amara smiled, the expression sharp enough to cut glass. "It concerns me because the design you submitted to Morrison Development 3 weeks ago is mine. Every line, every angle, every innovative structural element. Stolen from my personal files and submitted under your firm's name." "That's absurd," Kingston sputtered. "You haven't worked here in 5 years. How could we possibly have access to your designs?" She opened the folder and began placing documents on the table with the precision of a dealer laying out cards. "Because Marcus here maintained access to the shared server long after I left. Because Janet, bless her heart, kept copies of all my work files as backups. And because 3 weeks ago someone used Marcus's credentials to download every single file from my archived projects folder." The room had gone deathly quiet. Marcus Whitfield looked like he might vomit into his champagne flute. Amara continued laying out papers, each one a devastating piece of evidence. "Here's the server log showing the download at 2:17 a.m. on March 15th. Here's the metadata from your submission to Morrison Development showing the files were created on my personal workstation in 2022, 2 years before your firm even heard of the Morrison project. And here's my personal favorite." She placed a final document on the table with a flourish. "The original proposal I submitted to Morrison Development 6 months ago through my own firm, Blackwood Associates. The same proposal that was mysteriously rejected in favor of considering other options." Kingston's face had progressed from ashen to a sick green. Other partners around the table began studying their hands, the ceiling, anything but Amara's triumphant expression. "You see," she continued, her voice taking on the tone of a professor explaining a particularly elegant equation, "Morrison Development didn't reject my proposal because it wasn't good enough. They rejected it because someone convinced them that a newer, more established firm was preparing to submit an identical design. Someone suggested that perhaps there had been some intellectual property concerns with my submission." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Kingston's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. "That someone," Amara continued, pulling out her phone, "was you, Richard. Which brings me to the really interesting part of this story. She touched the screen and held it up so everyone could see. It was a recording app, the red dot indicating it was currently active. For the past 3 minutes, I've been recording this conversation. In New York State, only one party needs to consent to record a conversation, which means this is perfectly legal. And in about 30 seconds, Morrison Development CEO is going to receive a very interesting email containing all of this evidence, along with the audio of you failing to deny any of it. Kingston finally found his voice. You can't prove we stole anything. Those files could have come from anywhere. Amara's laugh was soft and dangerous. Richard, I've spent 5 years preparing for this moment. I didn't just collect evidence of your theft. I've been systematically documenting every single instance of discrimination, every stolen design, every time you've pushed out talented architects who didn't fit your narrow definition of what Kingston and Associates should represent. She pulled out another folder, this one significantly thicker. Janet wasn't the only person who felt guilty about what happened to me. Turns out, when you create a hostile work environment for anyone who doesn't look like you, people notice. People talk. People save emails and documents and recorded conversations. The folder hit the table with a satisfying thud. 3 other architects pushed out for mysterious reasons, all of them women or people of color. 15 instances of designs being attributed to the wrong people, always flowing upward to white male associates. And my personal favorite, the email chain where you and Marcus discuss how to keep the firm's aesthetic properly. What was the word you used, Marcus? Traditional? Marcus had gone completely pale. He looked like he might faint into his champagne. But here's what really makes this beautiful, Amara continued, her voice taking on an almost dreamy quality. Morrison Development doesn't just want innovative architecture. They want progressive partnerships. They've committed to working exclusively with minority-owned businesses on their Brooklyn project. When they find out that Kingston Associates not only stole designs from a black-owned firm, but actively conspired to exclude that firm from consideration, well, I imagine they'll have some strong feelings about that. She began gathering her papers with practiced efficiency. As will the New York Times architecture critic I'm having lunch with tomorrow, and the American Institute of Architects Ethics Board that will be receiving my formal complaint on Monday, and the New York State Attorney General's office, which has been very interested in discrimination cases in professional services lately. Kingston lurched to his feet, his champagne forgotten. Amara, let's be reasonable here. Perhaps we can work something out. Maybe discuss some kind of partnership or collaboration. The desperation in his voice was almost pathetic. Amara looked up from her portfolio case with genuine surprise. Partnership? She asked. Richard, I don't think you understand. I'm not here to negotiate with you. I'm here to watch you finally face the consequences of your choices. She closed the case with a sharp click. Morrison Development will be announcing their new partnership with Blackwood Associates on Monday morning. The project you thought would be your crown jewel will instead be the one that establishes my firm as a major player in New York architecture. The irony is quite poetic, don't you think? She walked toward the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. Oh, and Marcus, you might want to update your resume. I have a feeling Kingston and Associates is going to be doing some restructuring very soon. The hallway outside the conference room felt different as Amara walked toward the elevator. The same beige carpet, the same forgettable art, but now it felt like a museum exhibit from a bygone era. A relic of a time when people like Kingston could crush careers with impunity and sleep soundly in their Westchester mansions. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. As the doors slid closed, Amara caught a glimpse of the conference room's frosted glass. Shadows moving frantically behind it. She imagined Kingston frantically calling lawyers, Marcus probably crying into his champagne, the other partners suddenly remembering urgent appointments elsewhere. Her phone buzzed as the elevator descended. A text from Morrison Development CEO. Mrs. Blackwood, received your email. Emergency meeting scheduled for 8 a.m. Monday. This is deeply concerning. We'll be in touch soon." Amara smiled as she typed back, "I'll be there. Thank you for taking this seriously." The elevator reached the ground floor, and she stepped out into the marble lobby. The security guard looked up nervously, clearly having been briefed about the situation upstairs. "Have a good evening," she said pleasantly as she walked past. "You too, ma'am," he replied, his tone completely different from when she'd arrived. Outside, the Manhattan evening was settling into that golden hour that made even the busiest streets look cinematic. Amara walked slowly toward the subway, savoring the feeling of vindication that had been 5 years in the making. Her phone rang as she reached the corner. The caller ID showed Janet Mills, Kingston's longtime assistant. "Amara?" Janet's voice was breathless with excitement. "I just wanted to call and say, it's about time." Amara leaned against a lamppost, watching the flow of people heading home from their own battles and victories. "Janet, you know you don't have to stay there. My firm is growing. I could use someone with your experience." There was a pause, then a sound that might have been Janet crying or laughing. "You know what? Send me your information. I think I'm ready for a change." After they hung up, Amara stood for a moment longer, watching the city flow around her. 5 years ago, she'd left this building defeated, carrying a cardboard box of personal items and a heart full of rage. Tonight, she was leaving with something far more valuable: the knowledge that talent and determination could overcome prejudice, that justice might be delayed, but didn't have to be denied. The Morrison Building project would be her masterpiece, she decided, not just because of its innovative design or its potential to reshape Brooklyn's skyline, but because it would stand as proof that the future belonged to those brave enough to build it, regardless of what the Richards and Marcuses of the world believed they deserved. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from her business partner and best friend Keisha. "How did it go? Did you destroy them?" Amara typed back as she descended into the subway. "I didn't destroy them. I let them destroy themselves. There's a difference." As the train pulled into the station, she thought about the young architects who would never have to endure what she'd endured, the talented people who wouldn't be told they didn't belong simply because of how they looked or where they came from. The Morrison Building would be beautiful, she knew, but more importantly, it would be a declaration that the old guard's time was ending. The train doors opened and Amara stepped inside, already planning her Monday morning presentation. She had a building to construct and a future to design, one where merit mattered more than pedigree, where innovation trumped tradition, and where the names on the wall reflected the full spectrum of human talent and ambition. Behind her, in a marble-floored conference room 40 stories above the street, the last gasps of an era played out in frantic phone calls and desperate damage control. But Amara was no longer looking backward. She was moving forward, into a future she was finally free to build. 6 months later, Amara stood in the construction trailer overlooking the Morrison Building site, watching the morning crew position steel beams with the precision of a symphony orchestra. The Brooklyn skyline stretched beyond the construction site, and she could see her building taking shape against it like a declaration written in concrete and glass. Her phone had been ringing all morning with interview requests. The New York Times piece had sparked a citywide conversation about discrimination in architecture, and 3 other firms had already reached out about partnerships. The American Institute of Architects had fast-tracked her ethics complaint, and Kingston Associates was facing a federal investigation. Janet knocked on the trailer door before entering with a steaming cup of coffee and a knowing smile. "The morning briefing is ready," she said, settling into the chair across from Amara's temporary desk. "And you have 5 more interview requests from architecture magazines." Amara accepted the coffee gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma. Sometimes she still couldn't believe how quickly everything had changed. How did we go from a 2-person operation to 15 employees in 6 months? Janet laughed, pulling out her tablet to review the day's schedule. "Quality attracts quality. 3 more senior architects want to join us next month, including someone from Foster Plus Partners in London, who saw the Times article. The trailer door opened again and Keisha Williams entered, shaking raindrops from her jacket. Her business partner had been handling the legal side of their expansion, while Amara focused on design. The expression on Keisha's face suggested important news. Kingston Associates just filed for bankruptcy, Keisha announced without preamble. Complete liquidation. The discrimination lawsuit was the final nail, but apparently they'd been struggling financially for years. Turns out when you're built on stolen designs and exclusionary practices, you're not actually that innovative. Amara set down her coffee, processing the information. She'd expected consequences, but bankruptcy felt almost anticlimactic. What about the people who worked there? The junior architects who had nothing to do with Kingston's decisions? Janet looked up from her tablet. Actually, we've gotten resumes from 6 of their former employees. Good people who were never part of the inner circle. They're looking for a fresh start somewhere that values talent over connections. Through the trailer window, Amara watched a crane lift a massive beam into position, workers guiding it with practiced precision. The building was becoming real, transforming from lines on paper into something that would outlast all of them. Morrison Development had been so impressed with her work that they'd already commissioned her for 2 additional projects. There's something else, Keisha continued, her voice taking on a more serious tone. Marcus Whitfield wants to meet. His lawyer contacted me yesterday. He's claiming he was just following orders, that he never meant for things to go as far as they did. Amara turned away from the window, studying her partner's face. What do you think? Keisha shrugged. He's probably telling the truth. Weak people often are just following orders. But weakness isn't an excuse for complicity. Still, he might have information about other victims, other stolen designs. The ethical weight of the decision settled on Amara's shoulders. Revenge had been satisfying, but it was justice she'd really been seeking. Justice meant considering all the facts, even from people who'd wronged her. Set up the meeting, she decided, but not here, somewhere neutral, and I want you there as my attorney. Smart choice, Janet said approvingly. Though I have to say, watching you handle this whole situation has been inspiring. You turned their discrimination into your greatest opportunity. Amara walked back to the window, watching her building grow against the Brooklyn sky. The structure would house affordable apartments on the lower floors, creative spaces for artists and entrepreneurs in the middle sections, and sustainable offices at the top. It was exactly the kind of innovative, socially conscious design that Kingston Associates had never been capable of producing. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Saw the article in Architectural Digest. Your father would be so proud. The message brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Her father, also an architect, had died when she was in graduate school. He'd never seen her struggle at Kingston Associates, never witnessed her humiliation, but he'd also never seen her triumph. She typed back, "Building something beautiful, just like he taught me." 20 stories below, construction workers continued their methodical transformation of steel and concrete into something meaningful. In 6 months, families would call this building home, artists would create in its studios, small businesses would grow in its commercial spaces. Keisha cleared her throat, bringing Amara back to the present. There's one more thing. The mayor's office called. They want to discuss the affordable housing initiative you proposed. Apparently Morrison Development has been singing your praises to everyone who will listen. Amara smiled, feeling the weight of possibility rather than revenge. 5 years ago, she'd been told she didn't belong in the world of high-end architecture. Now she was reshaping it, one building at a time, proving that talent and determination could overcome any barrier. The Morrison building rose against the morning sky, a testament to the future she was building, not just in steel and glass, but in opportunity and justice. Her name would indeed be on the wall, exactly where it belonged.